We are back. I am Yaakov Langer.
And I am Nachi Gordon.
And you're listening to the Meaningful People podcast, but you already know that. And this week, we have someone from Eretz Yisrael. You clicked on the name, you know it already. Rabbi Berel Wein, probably the most famous from historian.
Yeah, he was an absolute wellspring of wisdom. Talking to him was just incredible. Wish we would have been able to be in the same room,
right?
In a different world. Mirza Hashem, Yaakov and I would have loved to, and we will love to travel around and be in these guests' home and host them here. But this is the best we can do for now. We had an amazing time with Berel Wein. We're very appreciative of him lending his time and all the people who worked to make this one happen. And I think you guys will really love this episode. We delve into many different topics, history, Yiddishkeit, a little bit of politics, today, what it was then. We really hope you enjoyed this one.
Stop giving it away.
I know. I just give you Cliff Notes. You're welcome. And just enjoy the rest of the episode.
Welcome to the Meaningful People podcast, the podcast where we talk to people who are
meaningful.
Yeah, that sounds good. Today we are joined by Rabbi Berel Wein as he sits in, I think, his home in Eretz Yisrael, and we're here in New York. Rabbi Wein, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
So, Rabbi Wein, could you give us some background about where you're from and I guess how you got to Eretz Yisrael? There's probably a lot in between that, but...
Well, basically, I was born in Chicago. I lived in Chicago the first 30 years of my life. In Chicago, I studied in the Chicago Yeshiva and the Beis Medrash LaTorah. I have smicha from there. And I attended law school and I was a lawyer for 9 years. And then I repented.
What made you, I guess, in your words, repent and leave the law field?
Well, I didn't really like it because, at least in my experience, I saw people at their worst. People who come to a lawyer and they want the last nickel. They want, you're in a contentious area. At least I was. Not all lawyers are. There are lawyers that deal with much more benign subjects. But I didn't like it.
Was it difficult for you to leave it? I mean, even though you didn't like it?
Well, it occupied so much of my time. I always wanted to learn more. I wanted to be a Rav. I come from a family of Rabbonim. Our family in Europe was 7 generations Rabbonim. My father was a Rav. My Seder was a Rav. So I wanted, but in the early 1950s, the Orthodox rabbinate almost dissolved in America, at least in Chicago. And I had to make a living. I married, and we had children. I had to put bread on the table, so I was a lawyer. But then an opportunity arose from it was really generated by my Rosh Yeshiva, by Rabbi Kreisler, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, and by my good friend, Rabbi Aryeh Rotman, Zichrono Livracha. So Rabbi Rotman was a Rav in a small congregation in Miami Beach, very small, it was 39 families, a storefront. And Rabbi Kreisler used to always tell me, you should have enough lawyers. I want you to be a Rav. I told him, Rabbi, like there's nothing open. In Chicago itself, there was a minyan that I was like the Rav of that minyan, but it was wasn't official anything. I spoke, I taught, but and I then realized that I couldn't be a Rav and a lawyer at the same time, because a Rav is supposed to see people at their best, just wouldn't work. So Rabbi Rotman was around in Miami Beach, and he was leaving, and he said, why don't you try out for the position? And I told him that I didn't think it was practical, and that I didn't have any experience per se in the Rabbanis. Why should they take me? But Rabbi Rotman was a very persistent person. So eventually I tried out, and eventually he was elected. Later on, I found out I was elected because Rabbi Rotman had proxies in his pocket. And we moved to Miami Beach. It was very interesting because the first year in the Rabbanis, my salary was less than my income tax was the last year in the law. But I was much happier. And that little shul became a big shul. We ended up with 250 families, built a beautiful building. It still exists in Miami Beach, Beth Israel. And I was very happy. And Miami Beach then was a wonderful place to raise your children. You never had to lock the door. You never locked your car. It was sunny 300 days a year. And all the great rabbis of the world came there in the winter. And I got to know all, and I never would have gotten to know. I knew the Ponevezher Rov, I knew the Satmar Rebbe, I knew Rabbi Yaakov, I knew Rabbi Moshe, I knew everybody. If I would have stayed in Chicago, I wouldn't have known anybody.
You just listed a bunch of very popular and incredible holy people. Do you have any? I mean, I know you do. Is there any story about maybe one of them that you could?
Book of stories coming out.
Okay.
That will include stories about these people, but I don't want to waste my stories on a non-paying audience.
That's fair.
Recently?
What do you want to know? I'll tell you about these people that I knew.
So I know you mentioned Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky.
Yes.
From what I understand, I think you used to drive him around a little.
No, I drove the Ponevezher Rov around.
Oh, okay, sorry.
The Ponevezher Rov came to Miami Beach basically to collect money. He stayed 3.5 months in the winter. And for 4 years, 4 winters in a row, I was his chauffeur. 3 times a week, we went out to collect money. And that was an experience of a lifetime. And he was, there are no words to describe a personality like him. But his mission in life was to build Torah. That was he told me once, he said, I could have been the greatest Rosh Yeshiva. He said, I was an Ilui in the yeshiva. Now I don't even say Yeshir in the yeshiva. Because my task is to build the yeshiva and to build other yeshivas like it. Somebody else will say the shir, and I'm going to build it. And he did. He had a dream to build 18 yeshivas in Israel. He built 3 big yeshivas. He built an orphan home. He built girls' schools. And he was a remarkable Jew, just a remarkable Jew. And he was a good friend of mine. I hate to say it that way because it demeans him. But he gave me advice. He protected me in my shul. He knew how to handle people. I learned so much from him. So in the book of stories that is coming out soon, I have a few very good stories about him. And he was really a superlative character.
For people our age and our generation, hearing names like this it's hard to really.
People in your generation cannot know Eastern European Jewry because it doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
It's not your fault, God forbid.
Right.
But the Gemara says on Rabbi, on Rabbeinu HaKodesh, the editor of the Mishnah, the author, the great Rabbi, they asked him how come he was so great. So the Gemara says that he said, Pamachas Raisi, that's Rabbi Meir Me'achorov. I once saw the back of Rabbi Meir. Ilu Raisi Befonov, if I would have seen him head on, I would have been greater. Raisi Mechadei Tvei. But at least I saw him from the back. I still saw Eastern European Jewry from the back. All of my Rabbeim were Lithuanian Rabbonim. Well, everybody I knew, it was still Yiddish. That was a different. It's not just a difference in degree, it's a difference in kind. That person doesn't exist anymore. I can't explain it to you, but it doesn't exist. And that's not to demean what we have now. I don't mean chas v'shalom to do that. But that is not there anymore. That Litvischer Rebbe, that Chassidish Rebbe, that's not there anymore. And I was fortunate enough to know them. And they had an influence on me. They saved me from a lot of trouble. And you have to realize that I did not have a beard then. And I didn't have a black suit. And most of the time I wasn't wearing a hat in Miami Beach because it's too hot. So they had 100 good reasons not to have anything to do with me. But that wasn't them.
Can you speak to can you speak to the difference, from, again, you were able to experience this, even if you saw it from the back, you saw it, and we didn't experience this at all.
First of all, they had a tolerance for Jews. By them, a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. You have to realize that in that generation, the conservative wasn't like they are today, and the intermarriage was not like today, and there was no the politics in Israel wasn't like today, so it wasn't as intense. So the Penevizherov told me many times about his conversations with Ben Gurion. And Ben Gurion respected him, and he respected, it was, to say that he was a fan of Ben Gurion would not be true. But he dealt with him. And so tolerance is one thing. They had very low expectations. You see, today we have very high expectations. We have high expectations materially. I grew up in a generation, my father never had a car, my father never owned his own home. I didn't expect to have a car, I didn't expect to own my own home. Who doesn't expect a car today? Who doesn't expect to own their own home? Who doesn't expect that in 2 weeks in Florida in the winter and at a summer vacation, and who doesn't expect that? And a year in Israel, and that's a given. Well, if you have high expectations, many times you're doomed to disappointment. They had very low expectations of life. They all suffered tragedies. Penevizherov lost his family in the Holocaust. Satmarov lost his family in the Holocaust. Kloisenberger Rebbe lost his family in the Holocaust. So they had different expectations of life. And they came to rebuild the Jewish people, each in their own way, with their own talents and with their own effort. And I'll tell you one story that I have in the book, which to me is probably my favorite story in life. That was when Rabbi Herzog, Zecher Tzadik Levrocha, who was then the chief rabbi, then it was Palestine. When I went to public school, We were the Palestinians. The Goyim used to holler at us, go back to Palestine. So it was 1946, right after the war. Rabbi Herzog, as the chief rabbi, traveled to Europe. He traveled to the camps, to the survivors. And he also went to the Pope of Rome, Pius XII. And he came to the yeshiva in Chicago, and he came, so they honored him. I remember him with he was such an aristocrat, great silver beard with its top hat, rabbinic silver cane. It was, it was aristocracy. Had a PhD from Cambridge. He was a Gaon Olam. He wrote 10 volumes of tshuvas after the war to free the women that were agunos, 10 volumes. There are thousands of Jews that are Jews because of him today. Anyway, he came to Chicago, and they honored him that he should say a shir in the yeshiva. I was before bar mitzvah yet, I remember it. So the yeshiva was, I was 11, 12 years old, and there were boys there that were 25. That was the whole yeshiva, it was the whole American Midwest, about 250 people. And I remember he said the shir in Yiddish. I even remember the Indian. It made such an impression on me. He said the shir on Ein Shliach L'Dvar Aveira, the Tosfos. And then when the shir was over, after like 40 minutes, he said, I wanted to speak to the young men, and he spoke perfect English because he was the chief rabbi in Ireland. As I mentioned, he had a PhD from Cambridge. And he said as follows, he said, I want you to know that I just came from the Pope of Rome. And I gave him a list. And on the list were 10,000 names of Jewish children who were sequestered in Catholic institutions in Europe by their parents in order to save them from the Germans. And I said to the Pope that I wanted him to give back the children. And he said the Pope told him that he could not do so because anybody that entered a Catholic institution was immediately baptized. And he said anyone that was baptized in the Christian faith cannot be given over to be raised in a different faith. And then when he said that, then he put his head down on the lectern and he wept. I have never in my life seen anybody weep like that. But he didn't weep for the 10,000, the whole 2,000 years of the exile poured out. And then he raised himself. He looked around the room at us. And he said, I cannot do anything more for those 10,000 children. But what are you going to do to build the Jewish people? What are you going to do for Klal Yisrael? And later on, when we all went by his, standing in the front, and we all went to shake his hand and receive a blessing from him. So he said, did you hear what I said? Remember what I said. Don't forget what I said. So I want to tell you, I'm a rabbi a long, long time, Baruch Hashem, by Klal Yisrael. Well over 55 years in the official rabbonis. And the Jewish people are a hard people. If it wouldn't be, we wouldn't have survived. And rabbis have bad days. and I've had my share. And I often thought to myself, what do I need this for? Right? I can go back and be a lawyer. In fact, I was offered a number of positions with law firms in New York. But I always heard Rabbi Herzog in my ear, what are you going to do? And I think that challenge still exists. Different generation, different methods, different technology, everything different. But the question is the same. What are you going to do for Klal Yisrael? What are you going to do to help build the Jewish people? So that really was a main influence in my life. That always reverberated within me. And not only me, I mean, that generation from the Chicago yeshiva produced people who founded institutions, who made aliyah, who were great rabbonim, it's just outstanding people. Because he lit the fire for us. So you say, what's the deal? We don't have people like that today. I don't have a Rabbi Herzog that can come and talk. But all right, Mashiach, you have to deal with what is. Dor v'dor shows. Yifsach v'dor kishmoel v'dor. So that we can't complain. But you ask, what's the difference? The difference is that they were Moser Nefesh to build Klal Yisrael. And so therefore, whatever we have is because that generation did it.
That's extremely powerful.
We'll get right back to this episode, but you know what we're here for. You know what time it is. It's AMR time.
Don't skip.
It's flu season. It's flu season. It's COVID season, unfortunately. Have the pharmacy in your corner. You're in bed. You're not feeling too good, or you have these prescription drugs that, you know what? Maybe it snowed a lot and you just don't want to run out to the pharmacy to get it. Have the pharmacy in your corner that'll say, hey, we got you. We're going to come to your house.
But hold on, Achi.
Oh, we're holding on.
AMR Pharmacy, it's not like they could provide service for everyone in New York, New Jersey.
Yes, they can.
You saw what I did there?
That's just the way it is, folks. Enough is enough. Give them a call at 848-222-1110, or if you're from Gen Z, head to AMRPharmRx.com.
We just lost 20,000 subscribers.
If you're wondering what Gen Z is, Google it. But while you're Googling it, also check, where is AMR?
I like that.
What is AMR?
They're the best. They're the best pharmacy.
See you guys. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
Rabbi Wein, I know one of the things that I know you for is your love for history, being a historian. And maybe the most popular from historian out there. Is there a point in history that
my publisher?
Is there a particular point in history that you specifically enjoy looking at, learning from, reading about more than the others?
It has changed over the years. When I in Miami Beach, I was interested in the time of the Rishonim, Rashi, the Balei Tosfos, the Rambam, Spanish Jewry, Ashkenazic Jewry, the beginnings. Later on, when I came to Monsey, for some reason, I was more interested in Bayis Sheni, and at the time of the Gaonim, Rabbi Sadia, Rabbi Hananel. And I think for the last 10, 15, 20 years, I'm really put a lot of study and effort into the 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, modern Jewish history. In fact, again, if I can use you as a publicity,
sure.
I have a book that's coming out on the response of Orthodoxy to modernity from 1820 to 1940.
So you have 2 books coming out.
Yeah, I have a book on stories, and then I have this book coming out. Yeah.
Wow.
You have to try and keep busy. At my age, if you're not busy, then, goodbye.
But you don't get tired?
I'm always tired. What do you mean you don't get tired?
At certain points, certain people just, they get older and then they, you have every excuse to just sit down and learn all day and not put out anything.
Well, my eyesight doesn't allow me to learn anymore, unfortunately. I have a chavrusa every morning, but he reads, but I can't do the learning that I once did. I can't see. But right now I'm working on a movie on the AMR that I hope will be out within the year. So the Pontifical Rav told me as follows. I once asked him the same question. He's building a school in Ashdod, he's building one in Bnei Brak, he's doing this, he's doing that. I said, Rabbi, why, So he said that he believes that if you're doing good work and then you're in the middle of a project, so he said the Malachim in heaven will let you alone. He's in the middle of the project, let him alone. So he said you always have to be in the middle of a project. So they have an excuse to let you alone.
It seems like you have a unusual passion and curiosity with history. I mean, the books are one thing, but to go ahead and produce a movie, what drives that passion?
Well, people are the most interesting things on the planet.
That's true.
And the Torah, it says, Sefer Toldos Sodom. It's a book about people, not a book about God, because you don't know, when you finish the book, you don't know anything more than when you started. But people, and people don't change that much. And what made people great 200 years ago make them great today. And what made them petty 200 years ago make them petty today. And I'm interested in that. That always fascinates me. And I must admit that over the years, I've said I'm 55 years old. So even though there were many times that I had difficulties, overall, I had a very easy ride. I had wonderful balabatim, I had wonderful synagogues, congregations, and therefore it allowed me a lot of latitude to do a lot of things. I never felt I was an employee of a congregation, that I was working for the board of directors. Again, I didn't mean that in disrespect, but they got the message. I saw myself as working, so to speak, for the Jewish people. So if the Jewish people needed a movie, I'm going to try and make a movie. They need books, I'm going to try and write books. Whatever is involved, I'm going to try and do. Meanwhile, I naturally tried never to neglect the congregation. And most of the time, I was able somehow to balance all the juggler's balls that were in the air. I think that's very important. It's a mentality that Rabbonim should have. They're not working for the people. They're working, Moshe is Eved Hashem. He's not Eved Lavodim. Not a servant of the people.
So you've been in the rabbinate for many, many, many years. Do you have any regrets or something that you maybe you would change?
No, I'm perfect. Certainly everybody has regrets, but I don't have any major regrets. For instance, I never regret a position I did not take. I've been offered very, very many positions in my lifetime. Some of them quite prestigious. I never regret that I didn't take that position. Certainly, I have regrets that perhaps I could have handled certain situations in a better fashion than I did. But basically, I generally I know I don't like the great Negro League pitcher Satchel Paige. You remember him? You ever hear of him?
Definitely.
So the great Satchel Paige said, "Never turn around; they're gaining on you." And I think that that's a wise statement. They're gaining on you. If you turn around, then you got to look forward, not look backwards. Chodesh Elul, we look back, but again, we don't look backwards, we look inside. There's a great difference between the two. So my answer would be I have very few regrets.
So looking forward a bit, because we don't want to look back, and I guess living in the present, do you think that there's something as a whole, Klal Yisrael, as a Jewish people, is there something we could be doing better? Is there something that we're not doing well enough now?
Well, I think we're not reading the American situation correctly. I think especially the Orthodox Jewry in America is going to have a very hard time. To a great extent, they're whistling past the graveyard. I think that the 1980s and 1990s are going to repeat themselves. I think the future of the Jewish people is Eretz Yisrael. I really do. The state of Israel. Like it or not, that's the way it is. And if you want to be productive, this is the place to be productive.
Can you elaborate a bit on the first part about, I guess, the American Orthodox Jews not reading the current situation?
Well, to put it mildly, the progressive attitude towards religion generally, and towards Orthodox Judaism particularly, is very inimical. And you can have laws passed in the United States that'll make it very hard for you to be Jewish. They'll run your schools. They'll tell you what to teach. They'll tell you what the curriculum is, what the hours of study should be.
You're saying everyone should really just make the move.
I didn't say that because I don't know if that's, everyone has to make their own choice, but I think everyone has to start to recognize what's going on.
Again, you're really an historian. Does this period of time that we're in right now, does it look familiar?
The Jewish people is as follows. The Meiri has it in his Akdoma Ovos. The history of the Jewish people is the Jews come to a country for a few hundred years, it's good. The Jews prosper, the country prospers, everything goes well. The Meshech Chochmah in Parshas Bechukosai talks about it, the Meir Simcha. He was in the beginning of the 1900s. And he says, and then all of a sudden something happens and the Golus is not good anymore. And then it becomes destructive, and then that chapter ends. Every chapter in the exile has ended. The Jews are not going back to Spain, they're not going back to France, they're not going back to Germany, they're not going back to Poland, they're not going back to Russia, they're not going back to the Arab countries, they're not going back to Yemen. Every exile has ended. So you think that yours won't end? Okay, I hope you're right.
On a lighter note, Rabbi Wein,
That is a lighter note.
I'm sure you've had many experiences, and I personally had the schus to daven in your shul a few times, and I love hearing you speaking. Is there any a funny story that happened to you that sticks out in your mind?
Lots of funny stories.
Could you share one of them with us?
Again, this story's in my book, but it's I used to have a series of what I call the airplane stories, things that happened to me while I traveled. So I think the first of my travel stories that I told over in shul, and then it became a staple. People used to ask me to repeat it. I was driving my car to Newark Airport to take a plane. I was with the OU. They had the OU Kashers. And I was going to take a plane to Chicago. And from Chicago, I had a plane that connected to a slaughterhouse in York, Nebraska, that the OU was looking at. So that morning when I left the house, etc., it was snowing. And the traffic was such that I came to the airport too late to catch my plane. So I went up to the counter. So she said, "Oh, that's not a problem." She says, "Rabbi, we'll put you on the next plane to Chicago. And then do you have a connection to York? You'll be able to make the same connection." So I thanked her and I said, unfortunately, I left very early. I didn't have breakfast. I had ordered a kosher breakfast on the plane. Do you think you can order a kosher breakfast for me on this plane too? So she said to me, "Well, it's within a half hour of taking off. I don't think they can get the meal on the plane, but I'll type it in anyway." So she typed in Rabbi Wein for a kosher meal. I get on the plane, I sit down, plane takes off, Baruch Hashem, everything is fine. Then the stewardess came over to me, she said, "Did you order a special meal?" I said, "Yes, I did." She said, "What's your name?" I said, "My name is Wein." So she comes back in a minute and she says, "I don't have a meal for Wein, but I have a meal for Mr. Lesh." So I said to her, "It's snowing for Lesh. Maybe he didn't make it. Would you announce on the public address system, Mr. Lesh, and see if he answers? If he doesn't answer, I'll take the meal." She said, "That's a good idea." So she said, Mr. Lesh, please respond." Naturally, Lesh is somewhere on the LIE or somewhere. And so they gave me the meal. So I asked her when she picked everything up, I said, "Can you look on the manifest and see where Lesh was going?" So she tells me, "Well, he's going to Chicago, but he's got a flight to York, Nebraska." So I figured I'm not going to have breakfast on him, I'm going to have lunch on him too. And I get on the plane and I sit down and the stewardess says, "Did you order a kosher meal?" I said, "Yes, I did." She said, "What's your name?" I said, "Lesh." She comes back, she says, "I have a kosher meal, but it's for Wein." So I said, "Why didn't you announce Wein on the public address system and see if he answers?" No one answered, and I had what the meal.
That is incredible.
I like that. Well, if Mr. Lesh is listening to this,
I bet Mr. Lesh once.
Something that we ask all our guests is, and for you particularly, I'm most excited to ask it. If there's one person in history that you could sit down with for an hour, who would you want to spend that hour with?
Well, it's a very hard question to answer. But I would really have wanted to have had the opportunity and honor to know Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon, because I think that Moshe lo kom Moshe, that really says it all. And I think that after the biblical period, and after the Tanoim and Amoraim, he's the composite Jew.
Well, what would you talk to him about?
If you don't know what to talk to the Rambam about, then you're really in trouble. How does he view things? What's his view? What's his view of history? What's his view of what happened to us? What does he think we should do now? How does he see the Torah surviving? All the things that he wrote about. I mean, we only see a piece of the Rambam because in the yeshivas we only have the halachic Rambam, and in Hebrew University they only have the philosophic Rambam, and by the Goyim they only have the Rambam and Aristotle. But the Rambam is on one whole piece. You got to put it all together. That's what makes it so hard to grab a hold of him. It's the old example of the three sightless people holding the elephant. So one holds the trunk and he says it's this, and one holds the leg, he thinks it's this, one holds the tusk and he thinks it's this. But none of them see that it's an elephant. It's all together. And that's true here too.
Do you feel that Mashiach is near?
I'll say he comes verifying, so it doesn't make a difference what I think or don't think. I do think we live in extraordinary times. I do think that we live in a time when Kibbutz Golios happened and is happening, when a lot of the prophecies of the Nevi'im have come true before our eyes. That I do see. But Mashiach is a pretty incendiary subject. Let him come, let him do what he has to do. The only thing I can say is that false messianism has done a great deal of damage to the Jewish people throughout the ages. Everybody has to define what false messianism is.
From the 613 mitzvahs, there's a lot of them only like Kohanim could do and stuff like that. But is there one particular mitzvah that has a special place in your heart?
One of the things that I looked forward to in making Aliyah to come to Israel was to be able to sleep in the sukkah, which I've been able to do when I came to Yerushalayim, which I never was able to do in the exile for various reasons. And so I treasure that.
Why specifically that mitzvah of sleeping in the sukkah? Why does that have a bigger impact?
It's sukkah, right? And then you feel, I really felt that, I'm at home. Well,
Rabbi Wein, what would you say? I'm going to ask the question one way, Nachi's going to say it the other way. I'm going to start off with, what would you say is the worst advice that someone ever gave you?
To be a fan of the Chicago White Sox.
Yeah, the White Sox are rough. I mean, you did get one World Series, though.
Oh, yeah, okay.
What's the best advice you ever gotten?
Best advice I ever got was from the Satmarov. He told me at a certain instance in Miami Beach, don't respond, just be quiet. And that was sage advice. And I've applied that advice much later in many, many other instances. So again, I never regretted what I didn't say.
Rabbi Wein, as a Rav for many years and seeing a lot of people and helping people through life, what's something, a constant theme that you've seen for people looking for help? What's something that people are always trying to get?
One of the problems that I see in much of religious Jewish society today is that people don't have a Rav. They don't have somebody to rely on. And then there always comes instances, tragedies, challenges, difficulties, and they're on their own. So, if you daven around, let's say, you daven one place Friday night, one place Shabbos, one place Mincha, and in the middle of the week you pick up a minyan. So you don't have anybody. Nobody knows you, and you don't know anybody. And one of the great assets of having a Rav, and I'm somebody who had a Rav, had a number of Rav on it, is that you're not alone in the world. And if you don't have, not only you don't have it, you denigrate it. The Pirkei Avos, it says, "Asay l'cho Rav." One of the interesting things, I've taught Pirkei Avos all my life. I wrote a book on Pirkei Avos that's been very popular. One of the rules that I have in Pirkei Avos is that they meant what they said. If they said it, if Chazal said it, then they meant it. So it says, "Asay l'cho Rav." And why does it say, "Asay l'cho Rav"? You have to make him the Rav. It could be that he's not the Vilna Gaon. It could be that you can learn better than him. It could be you don't like the way he wears a tie. Asay l'cho Rav. I think that's good advice. I recommend it to everybody.
Everyone, I want to ask you something. It could maybe be a little too personal. So if it is, you could definitely pass on this question. I know that you had two wives that passed away. And I'm sure different people in Klal deal with different tragedies, but you seem like someone that had a very deep relationship when you were married, but even after that, it doesn't seem like you're too let down, that you're too in the dumps, but you kept on moving. What gives you that energy to just plow through and keep on moving?
I'll tell you another story. This one's not in the book. Yosef Mendelovich told me this story. The Russian dissident. So when he was in prison, and in prison he became more and more observant, religious. So he decided one day he's going to wear a kippah. Now, the prison uniform did not include a kippah. So he took and he cut out a piece of sleeve and he put it on his head. The guard saw it and he reported him to the warden. And the warden called him in and he said, "Mendelovich, you're defacing the people's property and you have no right to wear that thing on your head. Take it off." So Mendelovich told him, "I'm not going to take it off. I refuse to take it off." So the KGB captain took his pistol out of the holster and put it on the desk. And he said, "Mendelovich, I'm telling you to take off that rag." Mendelovich said, "I'm not going to take it off. You can force it off, but I'm not taking it off." So then he took the pistol, the captain, and he pointed at Mendelovich and he said, "Take it off." And Mendelovich said, no, I'm not going to take it off. And the captain all of a sudden put the pistol down and put his head on the desk and wept. And the captain said to him, Mendelovich, aren't you afraid to die? And Mendelovich said to him, listen, I don't want to die. I want to get out of here. I want to end up in Jerusalem. I want to get married and have a family. I don't want to die. But I know that death comes from the same hand that gave me life. And you think that death comes from Brezhnev. And that's why you fear it. And I know that I can bear it. Mendelovich is, by me, one of the 36 tzaddikim in the world. But that's a lesson in life, right? Ki mi'itcha ha'chaim va'amavis. The Ribono Shel Olam gives it to us. What can you do? Doesn't help to complain. Doesn't help to say it's not fair. That's not given to us to understand. I don't say that on me, you know, it's not easy to be alone. I don't recommend it. But, zeh ma sheyesh. So that's what we have to do.
Rabbi Wein, you should live and be well on May Esrim. And this might be a little bit of a difficult question to answer, but what do you want to be remembered for?
I don't know, my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren will remember me as a Zayda father. I think that's the highest title a person can have.
That's beautiful. We're just going to end off with one last question. What's a lesson that the younger generation should try to keep put into their minds? The younger generation, what do they?
Lower expectations.
Lower expectations.
That's the message.
Mm-hmm.
Not to think that anybody or the world or your parents or the school or the yeshiva or the Rosh Yeshiva owes you anything. You make your way in the world. Have lower expectations. You won't be disappointed then.
Well, Rabbi Wein, thank you for taking out time from your night to spend some time with us. Nachi and I will be able to say we didn't get to see you in person, but we got to get a glimpse of you through the screen. So,
okay, be well and be matzliach.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for watching or listening to this episode of the Meaningful People Podcast. We hope you enjoyed. So much was said, and I personally enjoyed so much sitting down, getting to meet Rabbi Wein, talk to him.
Have you ever heard him speak before?
I have. Never, I think, in person.
Well, I guess still never in person.
Yeah.
But this was an intimate setting.
It was.
Just us
you know,
and him.
86 years old. Baruch Hashem Kanai Nahara. Sharp.
Yeah.
Really, really
He's
sharp.
so sharp.
He's so sharp, and he's got humor. So it was really incredible. Guys, we got some really big guests coming your way. And when I say big, I mean like
Tall.
Spiritually and physically as well.
Yeah.
We have a guest coming up that's like 6'10".
Yeah, well,
So you can guess a little bit
You'll see.
who that is. You know what I'm saying?
But we want to talk about
Daily
someone.
giving.
Yeah, we love them.
Guys, make sure you go to dailygiving.org. $1 a day for eternity. That's in your bank account. Shemayim.
nice. You'll see the many places that your dollar is going, really helping support these organizations that are changing the world.
dailygiving.org. No more questions. No more. Come on. Just go to it. Just go
do
to
it.
it and give it a shot. Guys, we can't wait to see you next week. Ciao.
And don't forget.
Oh, I jumped the gun.
Oh, okay. Don't forget.
No, you want to say ciao. It's like Kriya Shema Lamita. You know, I'll talk after.
Don't forget to do mitzvahs.